What's good, everybody? How we feeling? How we feeling? How we doing? How we doing? Ugh. So you already know who it is. It's your boy Diesel. We about to get to it with our daily devotion. Hopefully, you can take something away from this message right here. It is November 18th, and we are reading Jesus Calling. Now, you do not have to be a follower of Jesus. You don't have to believe in Jesus. All you got to do is listen. And I believe that this book has something that's edifying for everybody, regardless of your religious background and your religious belief, right? So stick around long enough and we'll find out. Come to me and rest in my peace. My face is shining upon you in rays of peace transcending understanding. And actually, before I even get started, I know some people are not going to like the fact that I'm about to say what I'm going to say, but I know there are people who tap into the universe or the creator or the all spark of life or whatever you want to call it outside of using the word God or revering Jesus, right? And so if you're going to stick around for this whole thing, listen to what I'm saying. And anytime you think of or hear that I'm speaking of God, just plug in what you want. The creator, the universe, whatever, right? And I'll tell you why once I finish reading the passage. What up, Gucci? What up, Minara? I like that name, Minara. Oh, come to me and rest in my peace. My face is shining upon you in rays of peace transcending understanding. Instead of trying to figure things out yourself, you can relax in the presence of the one who knows everything. As you lean on me in trusting dependence, you feel peaceful and complete. This is how I designed you to live in close communion with me. So, like I was saying, you can fill this in with the universe, the creator, whatever you want. And right here, it even says, in the presence of the one who knows everything. That's the creator, right? And so, once we slow down a little bit, and it says, instead of trying to figure things out, relax in the presence of the one who knows everything. Every single day, we wake up with things that we want to get done. We wake up with things that we have to do. We wake up with our responsibilities, and then we start thinking and planning for the future, right? Once we do all of this, we get anxious, we get tired, we get worked up, we get stressed out. And it's like, oh, snap, where do I go from here? What is it that I'm supposed to be doing? Where do I put my focus? Where do I put my attention? But if we're able to step back from all of that and just trust that everything's going to actually work out, there's a sense of peace and calm that comes over us. And one thing I always remember is I don't plan on leaving the earth today or tomorrow. And there are a lot of things that I know have to be done in order for me to live comfortably. So instead of beating myself up and stressing out over the place that I'm in now, it's not the last day. I have more time. So it allows me to be able to take a step back and remind myself I didn't create myself, right? And the person, the being, the energy, the entity that did is everlasting and eternal. So if there's anything that I want to know, I should probably try and figure out how to communicate with that guy. And it says in here that the easiest way to do that is to lean into a trusting dependence and to trust that the creator of the universe who created you for a reason with a plan that is greater than anything you could have came up with. So all you have to do is wake up with a willing heart and a willing mind and continue to step forward. Because if you keep moving forward, you're going to end up putting yourself in the position you're supposed to be in or finding yourself in the place that was meant for you. But you have to trust that the person who orchestrated this whole thing intended for you to have something, right? So once you can lean into trusting that you have a future and your future is already predestined and predetermined, it's way easier to relax a little bit. And remember, today's not the end of the world. I still have to get up tomorrow. I still have to pay bills. I still have to go to work. And in the midst of that, I still have to balance relationships with people, family, colleagues, all of this stuff. So today is not the end all be all and is not going to be the final determining factor in anything. So I'm gonna just take a step back. I'm gonna take a big breath and I'm gonna let the person who orchestrated the whole world handle the rest of today. If there's anything that I need to do, trust me, I'll know. You feel me? Because I can't just sit in one spot for forever and expect life to go well, right? but I can sit down today and wait until I'm inspired to take action again. So let me just keep going. When you are around other people, you tend to cater to their expectations, real or imagined. And that's strong right there. Because if you're someone who actually has a heart for people, or someone who actually cares about being respectful and being received well, there are times where you're going to be thinking ahead of what's even happening, of how to make the situation more palpable for other people, or how to make someone else more comfortable. And in doing so, you might be making yourself uncomfortable or just exerting more energy that you could have been putting into other things because you're trying to preconceive what they're thinking or what they're feeling or what they're experiencing. And this can be coming from a good place, but sometimes it comes from a negative place. How many times have you been prepared to have a fight or an argument with somebody about something, and then you bring it up to them and they're like, oh yeah, I totally agree with you 100%. You spent 3 days arguing with yourself in your head and fighting yourself about whether or not you should even bring it up, just for them to be like, oh yeah, no, you're right. You're 100% right. I apologize. You got it. So not only did you spend your time experiencing something negatively unnecessarily, you then spent your time thinking about that situation and how to change it, or if you could even change it, for way longer than you needed to. Than just saying, hey, maybe what I'm thinking in my head is imagined. And maybe me trying to cater to other people's expectations is hindering myself. Sometimes you feel enslaved to pleasing them, and your awareness of my presence grows dim. Your efforts to win their approval eventually exhaust you. You offer these people dry crumbs rather than the living water of my spirit flowing through you. And that right there is something I gotta put the book down for this one, because that's something I was talking and thinking about not that long ago. And it's like people try to show up for people, and it's like it's a beautiful thing, especially people who are called to service, to people who are called to serve. It's a beautiful thing to want to show up for people, but sometimes in our efforts to show up for people, we stop showing up for ourselves, which is the worst thing we can do. Because if you can't show up for yourself truly, honestly, and authentically, the way you're showing up for other people is not going to be true, honest, and authentic. You're going to be placating, you're going to be performing, and it's going to ultimately be fake. And one of two things are going to happen, if not both. One, you're going to reach a point of burnout. At some point in time, you're going to reach burnout, right? And two, you're going to create a version of yourself that cannot be maintained. So at some point in time, the energy, the attention, whatever you're giving to this person is going to falter, right? And now they're going to have to decide whether or not they like the version of you that's appearing now. So if you've been giving them a fake version of yourself because this is the way you think they wanted you to perform and the way you think they wanted you to show up, what happens when you reach burnout and now you have to show up as the burnt out version of yourself and what's even left? Because now this is a whole completely different version of you, which also isn't the true you. This is the tired, burned out, depleted version of you. This is the over the top, overestimating, over people pleasing, over giving part of you. And then the real you is in the middle and nobody knows them. And then what if they actually experience them and they don't want it? They don't like it. So you wasted your time and burnt yourself out for someone who wasn't even willing to experience the true you, right? And then on the opposite end, if they realize that you were overdoing and overgiving for them, right? And then now you reach a place of burnout and depletion, and all they can say is, well, this version of you doesn't suit me. You also burnt yourself out for no reason. You didn't build something that could last because it was built on a false truth. It was built on a false perception of who you were and how you were being and what you actually bring to the situation, the table, or however you want to look at it. And so this is why I'm a very firm believer in never overextending yourself, especially not at the expense of yourself, especially not for continued periods of time. I'm the type of person that I might need 4 days by myself to recoup, to just be able to interact with you again the way that you experienced me originally, or the way you experienced me when you met me. So I try to make it a big practice of mine to not have a preconceived notion or expectation for how it is I'm supposed to be showing up to interact with people. I show up as the version of myself that I'm feeling today with as much or little energy, zest, and zeal that I have, right? And does that sometimes not work in my favor? Only in building relationships with people who are built on false notions and who aren't actually caring about the relationship. Because sometimes people care more about the way that you make them feel than they actually care about you. Like, if you're around someone and they like your energy, they like how joyous they are around you, like you make them feel okay with being themselves and being carefree and lighthearted, that's all that they care about because now they feel that way too. And then if your energy shifts because you're tired, you're depleted or something, and they come around you then and they don't get that version of you, now they're wondering what's wrong with you and why are you treating them funny or why are you treating them different? It becomes a personal thing. Your energy was personal to begin with because they like the way you made them feel. And now that you're not making them feel that way, they're again taking it personal. And if they don't like it, they might in turn flip it on you and say you're doing something wrong. Or why are you not treating me the way you used to treat me? Or why are you not acting the same way you were acting? And it's like, dog, I'm literally tired. I'm depleted. I'm dry. I've been running myself rampant. I've been feeding this relationship. I've been trying to build this relationship and grow the things between the two of us, right? And now I just need to sit down for a minute and take a breather. It seems as if you weren't interested in building a cohesively, equally beneficial relationship. You just enjoyed the way that I made you feel. But in turn, you were not thinking about how I was feeling or how you're making me feel, right? And so this is one thing I just realized when it comes to overextending yourself into people pleasing and trying to make sure that people like you and that you're showing up in the way that people expect you to. If you have an expectation for the way that I'm going to show up and we haven't spoken about it, that's completely on you. Unless this is a job and I've been given certain tasks and requirements, the way that I show up today has nothing to do with what you like from me. Like, maybe I don't have a joke today. What? Maybe I'm sad. And so that's another thing is like, if people cannot meet you where you are enough to understand what is going on with you mentally and emotionally, then they shouldn't be around or shouldn't have a place in your life because they're not going to be able to make sure you're okay, right? And if they come around because they like the way you make them feel, that means you're making them be okay. You probably might even be being considerate of them and their feelings. But on the flip and inverse, they're not taking that same amount of consideration and time. That's a relational imbalance. And I no longer feed those. I do not give in to them because at the end of the day, I've always ended up depleted. And I don't like depletion. And I definitely don't like having to go back into hibernate mode and rebuild myself and rebuild some shit. You feel me? So I think that's a really big one. And this is another thing with what I'm saying about this book. Like, you don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to be a follower of Jesus. Like, this book is going to have something that is edifying for anybody. You can take something away. So, stay in touch with me, even during your busiest moments. Let my spirit give you words of grace as you live in the light of my peace. And that's another thing that I'm learning is like when my life gets the busiest, when I have the least amount of bandwidth, when I know what to do and say with other people, the least amount, that's actually sometimes when I have the best conversations, the best advice, the best listening ear, because I'm not making anything up. I'm not trying to think about what it is I think you want to hear. I'm literally just responding as truthfully and honest as possible to what I'm hearing. And a lot of the time when we're venting to people or we're expressing ourselves to people, the main thing we really just want is someone else's honest, open opinion. We're not looking for judgment. We're honestly not even looking for answers sometimes. I know myself, sometimes I literally just recount experiences to people so I can understand whether or not my experience makes sense or if I'm thinking about it the right way. Like a lot of the time, we just want validation on our experiences. So whenever I'm tired or depleted, I'm just completely listening and I'm not trying to figure out how can I make you feel better or you feel me? Like, no. All right, what are you saying? It's either A or B. And you feel me? People appreciate that sometimes. They appreciate that truth. They appreciate that honesty. And once you're able to be honest with people like that, they trust you to be honest with them about other things. And if you're honest with yourself, like if you can say, hey man, I'm extremely tired right now. I would love to do X, Y, and Z, but I don't have the bandwidth for the energy to do it. That person's gonna be like, oh wow, bet. They didn't just show up just to try to show up, right? Because if you just show up and you're tired, you're depleted, What if you start breaking shit? What if you dropping stuff? You can be less help when you're depleted than if you weren't there. You feel me? I, but I don't know if y'all really hear me though. I'm gonna start this one more time from the top, see if anything come to me, and then I'm gonna go into the scriptures, and then we gonna hop off this. So, come to me and rest in my peace. My face is shining upon you, and rays of peace transcending understanding. Instead of trying to figure things out for yourself, you can relax in the presence of the one who knows everything. As you lean on me in trusting dependence, you feel peaceful and complete. This is how I designed you to live, in close communion with me. When you are around other people, you tend to cater to their expectations, real or imagined. You feel enslaved to pleasing them, and your awareness of my presence grows dim. Your efforts to win their approval eventually exhaust you. You offer these people dry crumbs rather than the living. Hey, 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 hey. No. Dogs just ran in my room. I heard the door opening. I got some Popeyes in that bitch. I know what they was going for. Can't have that. Can't have that. And him right here, yeah, go. Yeah, I know what you wanted. He looking at me like, yes, dog, I know you was trying to get my food. I heard you open the door. Go sit down. Go sit down. Joey. And his little brother down there too, just waiting for the door to open again. Go sit down. You know what I mean? Getting me sidetracked. So, when you are around other people, you tend to cater to their expectations, real or imagined. You feel enslaved to pleasing them, and your awareness of my presence grows dim. Your efforts to win their approval eventually exhaust you. You offer these people dry crumbs rather than the living water of my spirit flowing through you. This is not my way for you. Stay in touch with me even during your busiest moments. Let my spirit give you words of grace as you live in the light of my presence. And so one thing that just came to mind, I'm not sure how versed y'all are with the Bible, but your efforts to win their approval eventually exhaust you. I just thought about a couple of different people. The first person who came to mind was Moses, right? Second person who came to mind is Joseph, the king of coats. And the third person who comes to mind is David. So rock with me. Moses was leading the people up out of, you feel me, up out of Egypt, right? And once they got up out of Egypt, the people was complaining about this, they was complaining about that. And Moses was sitting there trying to figure out how to appease the people and try to, keep them at peace and everything. Eventually, not even eventually, the whole time they ended up just journeying through the wilderness, fighting and arguing because the leader couldn't even focus on what it was that God was trying to tell him and where he was trying to lead the people, because the people were so disarrayed and displeased with every single circumstance that they kept complaining to him, and he kept trying to fix the situation that left them wandering the wilderness 10 times longer than God intended. You feel me? God wanted to tell Moses straight up, do this, do that, and keep it pushing. Instead, they said, all right, Moses, but why are we going this way? Okay, Moses, but I think we should go this way. Okay, Moses, but what are we eating? Okay, Moses, I think we need some gods. Okay, Moses, we need some good. Like, you feel me? Every single time Moses tried to give them direction, they came back with their own rebuttal and response. And eventually, Moses ended up losing his sight and being depleted and unalived in the middle of the wilderness along with everybody else, when he was supposed to be leading them to the land. He was supposed to be leading them to the new land of peace, freedom. But instead of being able to focus on what it was that God was telling him and continue to lead the flock the right way, he started trying to please the people, appease the people, make the people happy, make the people feel good so that they would continue to trust him. And ultimately, he ended up unaliving in the wilderness. Thank you, Moses, for your job well done, right? Another person was, like I said, Joseph. Joseph had the beautiful coat, right? He had a bunch of brothers, a bunch of siblings. They had a farm, family, all of this stuff, right? Joseph was the outcast. Why? Because he was his father's favorite, right? There's nothing that he did, but He wanted his brothers to like him. He wanted his brothers to be his friend. He wanted to play with his older brothers. So just look at it like this. Joseph was probably like 12, 14 years old. His older brother was probably like 33, dog. And he's like, dog, who is this 14-year-old that my dad is spending all this time with? Imagine it like this. I'm gonna look at it like this, because for me personally, my dad has hella kids. I was like 18 when I found out my dad had like a 3-year-old, 4-year-old son, right? And I found out because he picked me up and then took me with him to go pick this little nigga up, right? And we driving around the city, you feel me? Doing what a dad does with their son, right? I had never had this experience. I didn't meet my dad until I was 10 years old, right? So now I'm sitting here like, so you live across the country, but you came across the country to go link with your son to pick him up and ride him through the city. And now we about to go get lunch. You feel me? Me and my little brother and my dad. When I have older brothers, and this never happened for me, right? And so this was a moment for me to check myself as well and to grow, because I could have disliked my little brother. I could have been envious. I could have been jealous. My feelings was just honestly a little hurt. Like, damn, dog, you really didn't like me like that. Like, I don't know if you didn't like me, if you didn't like my mom. Like, his mom got some better kitty. Like, did my mom stop letting you hit? Like, I don't understand what it is that makes it so he is able to get this experience and not me, right? So if you look at Joseph and look at the dynamic between his older brothers, his dad had multiple wives, and his dad was like 50 years old when he had, 50, 60 years old when he had Joseph, right? So Joseph had 20, 30-year-old brothers, grown niggas, who are looking at him like, who is this 14-year-old who's getting the best pieces of chicken, right? Who's able to sleep on this big ass cot. Like, until I was 14, dog, I was sleeping on hay, right? But Joseph's father just had a super appreciation for his younger child, and he understood that his place in society in the future was going to be different than his other sons. It's like not really much different than a dad having one kid and raising him to be an athlete and to do physical labor and all this stuff, and then having another kid and being like, yo, you're smart as hell, you gonna get it off your brain, and I want you to be a good businessman, right? And it's like, dad, you don't even really know about business. Why are you grooming him to be a businessman, right? And so Joseph's older brothers, essentially what I'm saying is Joseph's older brothers was jealous of that nigga just because his father loved him. That's it, that's all. And as a youngin' myself, I kind of had a similar experience where I saw my father showing more love and appreciation to my little brother than I felt like I was shown growing up. And so I can just understand the idea as being an older person and be like, dang, dog, my dad really didn't rock with me like that. But instead of me getting mad at my little brother and taking it out on him, I just said, wow, that's crazy. So in Joseph's case, he wanted his older brothers to be his friend. He wanted his older brothers to like him. He wanted his older brothers to rock with him. And ultimately, he went outside with them. They said, yeah, let's go play a game, little nigga. And what did they do? They threw him in a hole and sold him into slavery. They threw their own brother into a pit, waited for some slave traders to come, and then sold him. And not even for gold. They sold him for some silver, right? And so, what is the point of this? Right now, in the scripture, it says, when you are around other people, you tend to cater to their expectations, real or imagined. You feel enslaved to pleasing them, and your awareness of my presence dims. So, if you know anything about the Bible and about Joseph, after this happens where he gets thrown into the hole, right? He gets separated from his family, right? He's now sold into slavery. This is when he starts to have real contact and communication with the Almighty. This is when his gifts start to show themselves, right? He goes from being a 14-year-old dude that's getting hated on by his brothers to being the right-hand man of the Pharaoh, of the king, because he was able to sit alone. It kind of sucks. He had to sit alone in prison. He ended up sitting alone in prison for a very long time, right? But during that time is when he learned about himself. He learned his own gifts. He learned his own talents. And he also learned that he didn't have to do what other people expected him to do. Because even after he got sold into slavery, right? He ended up working in the Pharaoh's house, right? And the Pharaoh loved him, and so did the Pharaoh's wife. She thought he was gorgeous. He was beautiful. He was from a different place. He was a foreigner in a new land, and she liked what she saw. And so, him trying to appease both his master and his master's wife, once the wife started coming on to him, instead of being like, hey, bitch, get the fuck away, he just played it cool, like, oh, yeah, we can't be doing all this. Like, well, what about the king? Like, nah, what about the pharaoh? Like, and he allowed himself to get caught up in a situation. He ended up in a one-on-one with her where she was trying to take her clothes off for him. And he said, I don't want it. But in his haste, I don't remember if he left with a piece of her clothing or he spilled something on it. Long story short, he ended up in a position where she was able to get undressed and alone in a room, and people seen him leaving the room, right? Once he rushed out of the room, she claimed that he was trying to come on to her and take her because he wouldn't actually sleep with her. But the only reason he was in this position is because he was too worried about keeping the peace. Instead of going to his master and saying, hey, bro, your wife is tripping, or instead of making a big deal and saying, look, bitch, get the fuck up off me, we can't do this, and yelling and saying, you feel me? Or even just telling the master, hey, I prefer not to work at your house when you're not home. Anything. He could have did a myriad of things because he already understood that the Pharaoh's wife was coming on to him. But he was trying to, one, keep the peace with his master and continue to do his work the way he already was, and two, not upset the wife of the master too much in order to make her angry with him. Instead, he ended up getting accused of trying to sleep with a married woman who also was the Pharaoh's wife, which ended him up back in a hole, right? And so, back to my point. When you are around other people, you tend to cater to expectations, real or imagined, and you feel enslaved to pleasing them. And your awareness of my presence grows dim. Your efforts to win their approval eventually exhaust you. So this is a beautiful example because, like I said, before he was just trying to get his brothers to love him. Joseph just wanted his brothers to like him. He wanted to be friendly with his family. And these niggas took him and threw him in a hole and then sold him into slavery, right? So now he is in a new land and he's a slave to the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh also likes him. But while trying to appease the Pharaoh and appease the Pharaoh's wife without crossing the boundaries, he gets accused of breaking the law and finds himself thrown and locked up again, right? But it's at this time that when he's alone and away from everybody else, he gets in contact with himself, he gets in contact with a higher power, and he starts to understand what it is he was called to do. He gets into contact with his gifts and ultimately becomes the right hand, second in command. But he had to get away from everybody. He had to get away from his family. He had to get away from Potiphar, which was the Pharaoh. He had to get away from her wife, and he had to get thrown into solitude. He was forced to go into solitude. And after coming out of solitude, he came out at the right hand of the king. So sometimes the best thing that we can do is get alone and get away from people. And then my third example, 4. When you are around other people, you tend to cater to their expectations, right? Eventually exhausting you. My other example, oh wow, we got 2 more examples actually. We're gonna talk about Solomon. So Solomon, the wisest man in the world, smartest man in the world, was one of the richest men in the world. Literally probably the most revered for intelligence in the Bible. He was the smartest man in the Bible, right? He also ended up at the demise of women. Isn't that crazy? The strongest, mightiest, smartest, richest king in the Bible was taken out by a woman, dog. Why? Because he was trying to appease them. So we'll say this. First off, a lot of y'all dudes be doing the most, and yourself's a big injustice by talking about polygamy is blah, 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 and it's acceptable, and I think all men should have multiple wives. Look at the Bible. Not every man in the Bible had multiple wives. Let's start there, first off. Secondly, a lot of the men in the Bible who did have multiple wives were royalty. They were kings. They were pharaohs. They were leaders and rulers. And so not only Did they hold a place of prestige? They had unlimited resources. You feel me? A bountiful of resources. Literally, this nigga could walk into a land and say, give me that house, give me that horse, and give me those fields. And then give them to whatever woman he wanted to, right? And then third off, alongside with having the title and having the physical resources, any man who was a king, a pharaoh, a priest who was stepping into public political power and office like that was smart as hell. You feel me? Like kings, pharaohs weren't just people, bruh. They were trained and like groomed. They were taught one, psychology, two, etiquette. They were taught mannerisms. You feel me? They were taught how to be polite. They were taught science. They knew music. They knew astrology. Like whenever men today bring up the Bible for a defense for why they think polygamy is real, I really just want to smack them one time for God, dog. Because no, not every man in the Bible had multiple wives. You want to bring up Solomon? All right, so we talking about Solomon now. Solomon was the smartest, wisest, richest king in the Bible. And his ultimate downfall was the fact that he was overly promiscuous and had too many wives, dog. So how did this work, right? One reason he had so many wives is for accomplices and for trades and peace treaties, right? If you married a woman from another land, that land was now an ally. And if you ever went into battle, their land would have to come and help you in the battle, right? So by having multiple wives, you were ensuring protection for your nation as well as expanding your lineage, right? As you would have children that would go to other nations and then expand your lineage there. If you married a woman who was a princess and they didn't get a king or a queen before the ultimate downfall of the current aristocracy, your lineage is now next in line for the kingship. So part of what he was doing had nothing to do with physical attraction or romance. He was trying to secure the future of his lands and nations. But the same thing with the fathers of these women too. They also wanted to secure their lands and their nations. If they went into battle, Solomon was going to either have to send troops, resources, or come into battle with them, right? And so let's just start there, because a lot of dudes be tripping by talking about the Bible is a perfect example for why polygamy is acceptable. And then they want to talk about David and Solomon. David and Solomon were kings. Part of their marriages were strategic accomplices for future preservation, not of just themselves, not of just their own lineage, but of the whole nation, the land that they lived in, right? So let's just start there. Secondly, whenever dudes start to try and use the Bible as defense for polygamy in modern day times and bring up examples of David and Solomon, we have to remember these men were kings, which means they were taught everything. You feel me? They knew science, they knew astrology, they knew math, they knew psychology, they knew everything about economics. And not only that, they were also trained in emotional regulation and well-being. They were trained in how to articulate their minds and thoughts and be able to relate that to other people and to be able to take the opinions, thoughts, and feelings of other people into consideration and make the best move. You feel me? They didn't have multiple wives just because they thought these bitches was bad. They didn't have multiple wives just because they wanted to have relationships with multiple women. You feel me? In some cases that was it, because Solomon also had concubines. You feel me? They had concubines and they had pretty much mistresses. But a majority of the concubines and mistresses were turned into wives, unless for some reason they weren't able to be married legally. And even with that, if we look at David and Solomon and say that these two kings from the Bible are a great example for why polygamy should be acceptable amongst men today, realize that both of these men hindered their lineage, their future, and their legend, their legacy by having too many women. Literally, Solomon threw everything off. Why? Because he started trying to please his wives. Why? Because he wanted to be a good husband. Here's the problem. The thing that he was doing in order to appease his wives went exactly against what God told him not to do. God said, do not entertain other religions, do not entertain other gods, and do not start doing certain religious practices because they are not of me. He started marrying women from different nations, different races, different beliefs, different backgrounds, different spiritual practices. And in order to make his wives happy, he started partaking in these spiritual practices. He started bringing in different idols and different figures for them to worship and them to revere. And then he started building different things for them to feel comfortable in his land, right? God said, nah, nigga, what are you doing? Eventually, my man just ended up losing his mind. Like, too many women. And so the point of this is when you are around other people, you tend to cater to their expectations, real or imagined. You feel enslaved to pleasing them, and your awareness of my presence grows dim. In Solomon's haste to please his wives and to try and keep the peace, he directly disobeyed God and directly displeased God, which directly hindered his future. Wow, that's crazy. And so again, a lot of dudes try to use men from the Bible, specifically Solomon and David, to okay the idea of having multiple wives. And I just have to say, let's stop and think about that. Because with David, he also hindered his future and his blessings. He became a liar and a thief and an adulterer all in one go around. Why? Because he saw something beautiful and he wanted to touch it. He was already a married man and he was already a king. If what he was doing was found out, not only the affair would have put a stain on his reputation, it would have put a lack of trust in his leadership and his judgment as a person and as a man. And then what he did in order to cover it up was technically treason. He had a soldier of his offed purposefully. He set this man up to have his life taken, right? This setup right there, again, would have put a blemish on his reputation, put a blemish on his mindset and on his leadership, and nobody would have trusted him. And even the people who did know about what was going on no longer trusted him. And then because of the reason, or then because of the fact that he did the things he did and he essentially was being deceitful and dishonest, God again said, look, dog, I had certain plans for you, but since you are going against what it is I believe you should be doing, I cannot give this to you. So unfortunately, it's going to have to be passed on to somebody else in your lineage, right? And so overall point, sometimes when we get into communication with other people and communing with other people, we start doing things that we know aren't in our best interest, or we start doing things that we know don't directly line up with the direction we're already heading in or looking to go. And even worse, sometimes we start doing things that directly inhibit us from what God has planned for us or has told us to do. And because of that reason, God will allow you to get knocked off your path, knocked off your course, and he will take that ass and throw it in the back room, throw you in the back corner, dog, make you go sit down for a little bit. You feel me? Like I said, Joseph was thrown into a hole, then sold into slavery, and then thrown into prison before becoming the right hand of the king, right? Moses was leading people. Before Moses could lead, he was separated from his family at birth. He was raised in isolation of his actual heritage, right? And then once he discovered it all, he stepped into a type of power and a role and a position that wouldn't have been bestowed upon him if he, one, had already knew who he was originally and grown up knowing. He probably would have left Pharaoh's house way sooner, or he would have looked down on his people and been happy for the position he was in. Or two, he wouldn't have been brave enough to actually try and break them out and kick them out. You feel me? If Moses didn't become Moses and the man he was in his 20s and his 30s, he wouldn't have been the adult who was able to take any type of command, right? Because by the time Moses found out that he was actually of the people, he was 20, 30 years old. If he would have found out as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old, he wouldn't have been able to do anything to enact anything, right? And so God will separate us in order to align us with where we're supposed to be. But with that, we cannot allow the voices, opinions, and suggestions of other people to get to us to the point that it removes us from our course. And so it says, when you are around other people, you tend to cater to their expectations, whether real or imagined. And you start to feel enslaved to pleasing them and your awareness of my presence grows dim. So just take this right now from me as a reminder for you to not break your back for the expectations of others, and to not dismantle and rearrange your whole life due to other people's expectations. And to know that sometimes what we have in our heads as the expectations, wants, and will of other people isn't actually the case. Sometimes we put the burden on ourselves to show up in ways for people that they weren't even expecting. Wow, isn't that crazy? To think we don't have to do that? And to think that our steps are already ordered and where we're supposed to be in life has already been chosen, appointed, and aligned. So all we have to do is listen. If we really listen closely to what our inner man is telling us, to what our spirit is telling us, to what the desires of our own personal heart are telling us, and not we should have this much money or drive this type of car or live in this type of neighborhood or date these type of people. Like if all of that just was quiet, imagine who you would be if the only things you incorporated into your life were the things that felt right, were the things that naturally called to you, the things that naturally were of an interest to you. Not because you can make $1,000,000 doing it, not because you get to go all over to these places, but because you'll actually enjoy it, right? Imagine if you chose your friendships because the people you're around are feeding into you, not because they provide experiences you can't provide for yourself. This might seem like a radical concept to some, but it's the way we were intended to be. As a little kid, your favorite color, you didn't have to look at everybody else's favorite color in order to decide what your favorite color was, right? As a little kid, you didn't have to eat all of the foods that people were suggesting you eat in order to know you didn't like that one, right? So that's what we really need to get back to, that little kid type mentality and listening to that voice that's inside of us, because it didn't disappear. It just got weighed down and convoluted with all of the expectations of other people and the norms of society. Sometimes it's a little bit of a hard pill to swallow, but that's why silence is golden and being alone is sometimes one of the biggest teachers, because you start to realize, yo, a lot of my past behaviors and experiences were things that I never would have been in alignment with if not for the people I was with and not for the people I was around. That was probably one of my biggest eye openers when I was in college. I ended up joining a fraternity, right? And no shade, like I willingly joined it and I willingly partook in the experiences. But once I got into my senior year, I just started retracing how much time I spent doing certain activities, whether it was partying, drinking, watching TV, whatever the case. Not everything was like completely detrimental. Some of it was great. We did community service, we did fundraisers, we did stuff like that. But like when I stopped to think about how I spent my time before I joined the fraternity, and how I spent my time during my activeness in the fraternity, I was just like, yo, bro, I rearranged what I consider to be important due to the people that I'm in proximity with. I'm not blaming them. I willingly joined the group and made them my friend. But then I stepped away from my own mind, my own opinion, and my own want, where it's like, yo, everybody's going here right now to go grab food. Come with. It's like, I'm sleepy as fuck. I'm tired as fuck. And I actually want to read a book. Oh, you about to go read? Well, I guess I shouldn't go read if everybody else is going to the bar. And that right there just comes down to knowing yourself, right? And so I'm not mad about it, but it was like in that moment of being 24 versus 21 and somebody's telling me to go do something that wasn't already in my head, and I have that little cognitive dissonance where it's like, why am I doing this? Why am I on my way? And it's like the feeling inside of me was like, bro, you're doing something that you actually don't really want to do. Why are you going? Right? And that's when I was slowly and surely was like, how many times did the inside of me tell me that this isn't what you want to do, or this isn't what you should be doing, and I ignored it because of the people around me, or I wanted to make sure that people weren't mad at me or upset or didn't think that I didn't like them or that their birthday wasn't important and stuff like that. Where it's like, it has nothing to do with that, and it's not personal at all. It's just there are certain things that the inner little kid in me would enjoy to do right now, or that a certain version of me just wouldn't even partake in. You feel me? It's like, but from being around the people who do partake in these things, I rationalized and normalized it to the point where I'm okay with being around it. And now it's getting to the point where I'm okay with doing it as well. Look, I ain't faulting nobody because it's super easy to do, especially when you enjoy the company of certain people. But that's why this passage right here I think is super important. When you are around other people, you tend to cater to their expectations, real or imagined. You feel enslaved to pleasing them, and your awareness of my presence grows dim. Your efforts to win their approval eventually exhaust you. You offer these people dry crumbs rather than the living spirit or living water of my spirit flowing through you. And so, as a follower of Christ, as someone who believes in the Holy Spirit, I personally ask God when I pray to give me the words to say, right? To give me the interactions, the experiences, and to put me in the position to be the real life representative of Him in real time, right? So with that being said, that means in my real life interactions, I have to show up in the way that's determined by Him. But once I'm depleted, once I'm tired, I'm not connected to Him. I'm not connected to Source. I'm not even connected to my own mind. Once you get so depleted, get so tired, you run around, you do this, you do that, and you get thrown off the track of your regularly scheduled programming. And now you're talking to somebody that God has intended for you to impart a message into, or to, you feel me, encourage. But you're depleted yourself, so you don't even have the message. You're not even you're not even able to relay what it was you were praying for God to give you to be able to give somebody else, because you spent all your time and attention out with other people. You feel me? You went shopping when you should have been in the house saving. You was at that concert when you should have been at church. You feel me? It could be as simple as you went to a watch party instead of being inside reading a book. Like, sometimes we just deplete ourselves mentally and emotionally, so when the situations arise that are actually where we're supposed to be and actually meant for us, we're not able to show up in the way that we should in order to capitalize on the moment. And that is why being alone and being in solitude and being in quiet is so important. So you can refuel, recharge, and realign. Because during the midst of the chaos and hearing a bunch of different opinions and a bunch of different people, and they're complaining about this in their life, and they're complaining about this in their life, and they're rejoicing about this, you feel me, victory, and now you're looking like, should I be complaining about these things in my life? Should I be trying to get the same accomplishment that they got because they're happy about that? Like, or I had a similar experience, and that experience for them fucked them up, like they're really emotionally distraught. Should I have been more sad about this? Like, we look around to the way other people handle life, and we start thinking that something's wrong with us because of the way we're going about it, when really we're just different people with different skills, different talents, and different bandwidths for different things. So, I'm gonna reiterate again. Yes, the name of this book is Jesus Calling. No, you do not have to be looking for Jesus in order to receive something positive from this book. Don't know how many times I gotta say it. I'm gonna say it till I'm blue in the face, right? But with that said, I've been spitballing for almost an hour. I hope somebody took something edifying away from this. I'm tired, my back hurt, and I'm preaching to y'all, but this is actually a message to me because I'm over here telling y'all I'm tired and I'm depleted. And part of that is because I've been outside for the last 3-4 days, and even prior to the last 3-4 days, for the last, like, I want to say 2 months. I've just been more concerned with other people. And not in a bad way, but it's like I've been more active in being involved around other people and being outside with other people, which means I have to cater to the way that other people are thinking and feeling, and I'm just not recharging, right? So I'm telling y'all to go sit down and recharge, but it's really because I need to go sit in a corner for the next 3-4 days, right? And I think it's mad funny because this book is a daily thing. It's a daily devotional. So every day is slightly different. Today's message was go sit down and recharge. And I think I'm going to heed that message and actually do what it's telling me to do. You feel me? But yeah, like I was saying earlier, anybody who tapped into the live, if you want to recount the whole video, it's gonna be posted on YouTube. I'm doing a simultaneous stream right now, and then a lot of the content that I make, the whole video is just already on YouTube. So if you want to see more of this face, tap in there, and Diesel out. Oh yeah, and if you want to see your face look like this face, get you some of this whipped tallow honey balm. It's all natural. It has lavender in it, honey in it, and beef tallow, and it's just gonna give you a nice, even, beautiful glow. And all my fellas, if you tired of having a patchy beard, go ahead and get you some of this. It's a beard growth kit, right? And it's just gonna help your beard come in nice and strong. Everybody have a blessed day. Be beautiful.